The restaurant had been booked 3 months in advance. Table 12. Corner position. Floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the glittering Seoul skyline, like a painting no artist could afford to frame. The candles were ivory, tall and elegant, flickering with the kind of warmth that made everything look softer than it really was. A single arrangement of white peonies, Elena's favorite, sat in the center of the table, and beside it, a leather-bound menu that the waiter had placed with both hands, the way people handle things they know are expensive. Elena Brooks had arrived at exactly 7:15. She wore a deep burgundy dress that caught the light when she moved. Her dark hair swept over one shoulder, pearl earrings at her ears. Understated, deliberate, the kind of woman who didn't need to shout to be noticed. She had learned, over 5 years of marriage to Jae-min Kang, that subtlety was its own kind of power. She sat down, smoothed the napkin across her lap, and ordered sparkling water while she waited. She smiled when the waiter complimented her necklace. She checked the time once, then again. At 7:40, she sent a text. Just one. "I'm here. Table 12. 3 gray ticks. No response." She lifted her water glass and looked out at the skyline, and told herself he was probably caught in traffic, or stuck in a meeting that ran long, or, and this was the thought she always kept at the bottom of the pile, the one she refused to look at directly, or he had simply forgotten. Again. The way he forgot her birthday last year, the way he forgot their agreement to leave events by 10 so she wouldn't have to stand alone in corners, making conversation with people who looked through her like glass. She waited. The peonies smelled beautiful. At 8 o'clock, her phone buzzed. Not a message from Jae-min, a notification from a celebrity news account she had never chosen to follow, but had somehow been added to. She almost swiped it away. She didn't know why she tapped it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was something she had known for months, sitting quietly in her chest like a stone she had learned to breathe around. The video loaded. It was a live stream from the Kang Group's annual gala, an event she had not been told about, an event that, apparently, had been happening for the last 3 hours on the other side of the city, in a rooftop venue with crystal chandeliers and a crowd of Seoul's most photographed faces. The camera panned across laughing guests, past servers in white gloves, past a stage where a band played something smooth and European. And then she saw him. Jae-min Kang stood at the center of the stage in a midnight black suit, his jaw sharp, his posture the kind of composed that took years of wealth to perfect. He was holding a microphone in one hand and smiling, not his formal smile, the one he wore at board presentations or charity dinners. This was the other smile, the private one, the one Elena used to believe belonged only to her. The woman beside him was Seo Yura. Seo Yura, who was beautiful in the way that made rooms go quiet, who wore red like it was her natural skin, who tilted her head when she laughed and touched Jae-min's arm when she spoke, a gesture so casual, so practiced, so intimate, that Elena's water glass made a soft sound as she set it back on the table without realizing she had moved at all. On the screen, Jae-min reached into his jacket pocket. The crowd murmured with anticipation. Cameras flashed, and he produced a jewelry box, small, black velvet, the kind that only ever means one thing. And he opened it, and the diamond necklace inside caught every light in the room and threw it back doubled. A gasp rippled through the crowd, then applause, then laughter. Then Seo Yura turning her back so Jae-min could fasten the clasp himself, his fingers at her neck, her eyes closed, both of them performing a moment that the whole room was meant to witness and remember. The whole room. And through a phone screen, in a restaurant on the other side of the city, a wife at table 12. Elena set the phone face down on the tablecloth. She looked at the peonies for a long moment. Then she folded her napkin, placed it precisely beside her untouched plate, picked up her clutch, and walked out of the restaurant without saying a word to anyone. To understand what happened that night, you have to go back further. You have to go back to the beginning, when Jae-min, Kang was not yet a man who gifted diamond necklaces in public to women who were not his wife. When he was still someone who needed things, who needed her, specifically, in ways he would later spend years pretending he hadn't. They had met at a business conference in Busan. Elena was 26, working as a financial analyst for a mid-sized consulting firm, brilliant in the methodical, quiet way that doesn't always get recognized in rooms that reward volume. Jae-min had just inherited the leadership of Kang Group from his father, a company with legacy but crumbling infrastructure, and he was terrified, though he would never have used that word. He would have said challenged. He would have said strategic. But Elena sat beside him at a breakout session on market restructuring, and in 40 minutes of conversation over lukewarm coffee and printed slides, she identified 3 pressure points in his company's supply chain that his entire executive team had missed. He called her the next morning. He called her every morning after that. What grew between them was real. Elena was certain of that. She had replayed it enough times to be sure. There was a period, roughly 2 years before the wedding, and perhaps 18 months after, when Jae-min looked at her like she was the most valuable thing in any room. When he asked for her opinion on acquisitions, on restructuring proposals, on the kind of long-form thinking that takes patience and a steady hand. When he told her, quietly, over takeout containers at his desk at midnight, that she was the only person who made him feel like he wasn't completely out of his depth. She had loved him enormously for saying that. She had loved him at his most uncertain. She had loved him through the first boardroom failure and the public rebuke from a senior investor, and the night he sat on the kitchen floor at 2 a.m. because the pressure of his father's name felt like a ceiling pressing down. She had sat beside him on that floor. She had not tried to fix it or minimize it or hand him solutions. She had just been there, present, solid, real, until the ceiling lifted enough for him to breathe. That was who she was to him once. And then the company stabilized. And then it grew. And then the invitations began to change. More exclusive, higher floors, different dress codes. And the people surrounding Jae-min changed with them. His inner circle shifted from those who had helped him build to those who wanted to stand near what he had built. His assistants became more polished. His schedule became more protected. His language began to carry the particular sheen of a man who has started to believe the version of himself that gets written about in magazines. Elena noticed the shift gradually, the way you notice a season changing, not in a single moment, but in accumulation. The first time he corrected her pronunciation of a French wine in front of guests. The first time he forgot to introduce her at an event, and she stood beside him for 11 minutes before someone else extended a hand and asked her name. The first time she offered an opinion on a company decision, and he smiled at her in a way that did not reach his eyes, and said, "That's sweet, but it's a bit more complicated than that." She was the same woman who had sat beside him at that conference in Busan. She was the same woman who had found what his entire executive team had missed. But she no longer fit. That was the word she began to hear, whispered around the edges of his world. Not sophisticated enough, not prominent enough. A quiet wife for a man who was becoming louder by the month. The elite circles he moved in had opinions about women, what they should look like, whose families they came from, what brands lived in their closets. And Elena, who had grown up in a practical household with a mother who worked double shifts and a father who read engineering manuals for pleasure, did not clear their thresholds. Jae-min never defended her, not once, not clearly, not in the way that mattered. He would say, later, in the privacy of their apartment, that he hadn't wanted to draw attention to it, that he was protecting her. But Elena had learned by then that protection offered in silence looks very much like abandonment. The late nights began around their 4th year of marriage. She noticed them the way she noticed everything, carefully, without accusation, filing each observation in the part. Of herself, she had learned to keep very still. He smelled different when he came home, not just of alcohol or cigarettes, of a different kind of evening, a different energy. He began sleeping on the far side of the bed with the deliberateness of someone making a choice rather than simply rolling over. He stopped asking for her opinion. He started looking at his phone with the screen tilted slightly away. She did not ask. She wanted to. She composed the question in her head approximately 40 times over 6 months. Who is she? 3 words. Simple. But every time she stood at the edge of saying it, she looked at him and saw something that stopped her. Not love, exactly. Not anymore. But the ghost of the man who had sat beside her on a kitchen floor. And something in her still wanted to protect that ghost from her own questions. So she waited. She kept showing up. She kept attending the events that were beneath his circle's standards, and standing in the corners, and making quiet conversation, and being the wife of Jae-min Kang, which had become, without her fully realizing, a role she inhabited entirely, and a person she inhabited less and less. And then came the anniversary. She found him at the gala. She hadn't planned to go. She had driven home from the restaurant, changed out of the burgundy dress, put on something simpler, and sat on the edge of the bed for approximately 4 minutes. Then she got back into the car. She arrived as the event was winding down, guests filtering toward the exits in pairs and small laughing groups. The security at the door knew her. She was, technically, still the woman's name on the emergency contact list, and they let her through without a word. She walked through the thinning crowd, past the remnants of the evening, half-empty glasses, scattered flowers, a stage where the band was packing up. She found him in an anteroom just off the main hall, jacket unbuttoned, glass of whiskey in hand, Seo Yura's laughter still audible from somewhere nearby. When he saw Elena, something moved across his face. Not guilt, she noted, or at least not primarily. Something closer to calculation. An instant assessment of the situation, a reaching for the right posture. Elena. He said her name the way you say the name of an appointment you had forgotten. I was at the restaurant, she said. Her voice was completely level. She had always been better than him at stillness when it mattered. There was an event. He gestured vaguely at the room around them, as though the gala were something that had appeared without warning. I meant to tell you, you gifted her a diamond necklace, Elena said, on our anniversary. Silence. He turned slightly, set his glass on a nearby surface, straightened his cuffs. She watched him do it, watched him physically compose himself into the version of Jae-min Kang that handled difficult situations. Elena. This time her name was gentler, with the particular softness that precedes something devastating. You know this world requires a certain image, a certain kind of presence. I know, she said. Yura is. I'm not asking about Yura. Her eyes were steady. I'm asking if you understand what you did tonight. He was quiet for a moment. And this was the moment she would return to, months later, years later, when she needed to remember why she had done what she did. He looked at her, with something that was almost pity, and he said, This world requires perfection, Elena, and you don't belong in it. She heard it. Every word. She let it land completely, let herself feel the full weight of it, the shape of it, the precise place it struck. She did not flinch. She did not raise her voice. She did not give him the satisfaction of watching her fall apart in front of him. She reached up and removed her wedding ring. It was a simple gesture. Quiet. Almost slow. She held it for a moment, this small gold thing that had meant so much once, and placed it on the surface beside his whiskey glass. Good night, Jae-min. She walked out. Not quickly. Not in the dramatic exit of someone performing pain for an audience. She walked out the way she had walked into every event in the last 5 years, with composure, with dignity, with her head straight and her steps even, except that this time, She was walking for herself. The divorce papers were filed by morning. The silence that followed was the kind that grows in the space between what a man expected and what actually happened. Jae-min had anticipated, on some level, a fight. An argument, certainly. Tears. He had always been slightly uncomfortable with Elena's tears because she cried so rarely, and when she did, it was quiet and devastatingly genuine. He had expected phone calls, pleas from her side, or anger, or the prolonged negotiation that divorces always seem to become. He had prepared himself in the cold-blooded way of a man who believes he is the primary character in every story, for the inconvenience of her reaction. There was no reaction. Elena Brooks disappeared so completely from his life that it was almost artistic. She moved out within a week. She left nothing at the apartment. Not a scarf, not a book, not a single trace of herself. As though she had conducted an internal audit and found nothing worth leaving behind. She responded to the legal correspondence through her attorney. She did not call. She did not appear at any event where he was present. She did not send messages through mutual contacts or ask anyone how he was doing. She was simply gone. Jae-min told himself he was relieved. Seo Yura moved into the apartment with the enthusiasm of a woman who had waited a long time for exactly this. Rearranging things, filling spaces, laughing loudly in the kitchen in the mornings. She was beautiful and vibrant and entirely present in a way that Jae-min, for about 3 weeks, found intoxicating. But something was off in the world around him, and he couldn't identify it at first. Small things. A hesitation in a board member's voice when he made a proposal. A journalist who had always been favorable running a piece that described his leadership style as increasingly volatile. A deal with a Singapore-based firm that should have been straightforward and wasn't, the other side pulling back at the last moment without clear explanation. He didn't connect any of it to Elena's absence, not yet. He was not the kind of man who made those connections easily. Seo Yura was spending at rates that alarmed his CFO, who brought him a report he hadn't asked for. She was also, it turned out, less discreet than he had assumed. Her version of their relationship, shared in various forms across various social circles, painted Jae-min not as a powerful man who had made a clean personal transition, but as someone who had humiliated his wife publicly on their anniversary. The narrative was already written. It just hadn't reached him yet. He started remembering Elena in fragments, the way she would sit at the kitchen table early in the morning with her laptop open and a coffee at her elbow, running numbers with the quiet intensity of someone who genuinely loved the work. The way she would listen in meetings, fully without performing